All right, guys, our next guest has announced an exciting speaking tour around Australia and New Zealand. Up close and personal, we'll give you a rare chance to find out about the man behind the title. Before he embarks on the tour, though, he will first headline possibly the most attended UFC event of all time when he fights Israel Adesanya UFC 243. It's a pleasure to welcome the Reaper, Robert Whittaker, back to Submission Radio. Rob, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, guys. Good to be back.
It's absolutely our pleasure. First things first, Rob, obviously got to talk about this speaking tour. Why did you decide to do it, and what sort of can fans expect from this evening?
Yeah, I guess the reasoning behind it was that I feel I have a story to tell, and I had a pretty, I wouldn't say, yeah, it was a rough upbringing, I guess. There were complications and trials and tribulations I had to go over and get through, and the load was heavy, and I want to speak about that in this tour, and let people in on my story and what I went through growing up, and how I struggled to get to where I am today.
I mean, you're a bit of an enigma wrapped in a puzzle, Robert Whittaker. We've been speaking to you for many years now, and you're always surprising us with facts and fun things about your personal life. Do you think people might walk away from the experience finding out a few surprising facts and learning a few things that they never really realized about you?
100%. I'm a very guarded person. I find it very hard to let people in, as well as to speak about anything that is even a little bit uncomfortable for me. And that's kind of what I want to get out in this speaking tour, is to let people in, to tell people of my upbringing, being housing commission, single parents, going through all that, going through like a stigma of poverty, like in high school and everything, and just to how I stayed true to what I was doing, stayed true to my goals and values, and managed to climb my way up to a world title.
Absolutely. It's funny because, like, watching you on Grange TV and sort of seeing you over the years open up more and more, like, I understand what you mean about being able to relate. Like, as someone who's kind of introverted myself, like, the more I hear you speak, the more relatable I find you. And you actually did an episode of Grange TV this week, and you really opened up on, like, your mental health and some of the issues you had going, coming back from the injury and preparing for Kelvin. It's something fans that didn't really know about, until you sort of broke down how hard it was to get back into training. And sort of after your injury, there were times where you didn't even want to leave the house or really go to train. And obviously that's something brave of you to come out and sort of talk about that in a very public forum. For those who didn't hear the show, can you just sort of touch on what that time was like for you?
Yeah. So yeah, like I said, I spoke about it quite in length on Grange TV yesterday. The depression is real, and it doesn't matter who you are. You can get depressed, and you can feel like you're falling down a pit of despair. But it was hard. That camp was very hard for me. Coming back from the injury, being behind in terms of like where the goal setting that I wanted, my markers, I was very behind. Seeing my training partners performing much better than I, and it was a hard time for myself to motivate myself to keep going, to motivate myself to feel good. I was very apathetic and didn't want to do anything. That's kind of how it is for me. So, but I did, and I'm on top of the world now.
And that episode that Casper mentioned, that's episode 54 of Grange TV, just for all listeners and watchers out there that haven't checked out the program. I actually think, man, it was a really cool show, because I know a lot of people deal with mental health issues, but when you see the champ of the world talking about these kinds of things, I think it really helps a lot of people and puts things in perspective for a lot of people. So again, I'm recommending everybody checks out that episode, because it's very inspirational. I think it does a lot for young people, old people, and everybody in between. But for those who haven't heard the episode yet, Rob, ultimately, what was the thing that sort of pulled you out of that depression and put everything back into perspective for you and got you back on track?
That's the hardest thing. There's no real answer to that for myself. But for myself, what really helped me was obviously the people that surrounded me. Being supported by my wife, my kids, the support system I had around myself, my coaching staff, my training partners, they all cared for me. And just knowing that they're there and that you can talk to them is very important. But Like I just honestly, I just reached a point where I felt that I was quite. It was either do or die for me. So it was either I had to just start hitting the sessions. I had to get through it. I had to bite down on the mouth guard, and just plod along, or not. And the alternative would have been like hang up the gloves, call it in, and I wasn't ready to do that.
Absolutely. I mean, during that point, you brought up some situations where you're like, I didn't feel like leaving the house sometimes. You were coming up with excuses to not to go to training. You something about your wife and a horse, even though she doesn't ride a horse. You were like, oh, like there's a horse thing going on. Any of those points, did it ever cross your mind that, hey, like maybe like I wanna move on to something else, or ultimately did you always know like I gotta come back, like I gotta go back in that octagon?
It's not like I suddenly felt like picking up a new hobby. It's not like I suddenly felt like doing a new job. It was more of a like I didn't want to do anything. Like I just wanted to have naps, not leave the house, and just do nothing. Like it's hard. Like I was demotivated to do anything, and it wasn't specifically a sport related thing. It was just more like everything. I was just tired, mate. I was just tired of it all.
Absolutely. We'll move on to the fight in just a sec, but I mean, it's crazy because the fight didn't happen. Obviously, you had the health issues. You had to go get surgery pretty much right before the fight. And financially, it was pretty shitty. You know, there were a lot of fans kind of talking shit about you. Oh, why isn't Rob fighting? All that kind of stuff. But looking back on it now, because you've had an amazing camp, I know you've spoken about the fact that, like, you're so much further along now than you were going into that Kelvin Gastelum fight. Do you think it was kind of a blessing in disguise not going into that octagon, sort of not feeling 100% there and going through that difficult camp and being able to go out there in Melbourne and Marvel Stadium in front of a capacity crowd and sort of show your best?
Yeah, it was definitely a blessing in disguise, for multiple reasons. Like the first reason is like I got the surgery done when I needed it to get done, and as my son sort of broke down the door.
Takes after his father. Strong kid, right?
Yeah. So it was definitely a blessing because I didn't die. That's always a good thing.
It's a bonus.
To be able to come back to Melbourne, put on a show they deserve on a bigger scale with more anticipation for it, with a training camp that is honestly 100 times better for myself personally. It's unreal. It's unreal.
That's the ideal scenario, especially going into such a massive fight, obviously in Marvel Stadium, which hopefully is going to be packed with heaps and heaps of people. Obviously, we got to touch on that press conference. We were over in the States for UFC 241, but it was great watching that on the stream, watching sort of you and Israel in the same room. And I feel like the crowd and the people there in attendance were as much a part of the show as, you and Israel. It was almost like split in threes who the biggest stars were. What did you make of that press conference overall? I feel like you kind of relished that when the fans got behind you. And what did you make of the guy with the megaphone in the back?
Honestly, it was my favorite press conference to date. It was one of the press conferences I actually enjoyed, because I didn't need to say anything. The crowd had a huge. They had things to say themselves. They had a huge involvement in the press conference, and Izzy just kind of fueled it, and it was just fun to watch, to be honest. And the guy with the megaphone, although I don't condone that behavior, like I thought that was good work, mate.
The guy with the megaphone actually reached out to us via email and sent some photos right after that press conference. So good stuff to him. I mean, he was prepared. He had a flag. It said Israel sucks on it. He had a whole thing going on. But I was going to say, we were all watching it in the States, even with the UFC team and the media. And one of the things we noticed, I don't know what you thought about it, was it was kind of one of the first times we saw the crowd kind of turn on Israel and got to see his reaction to people kind of, not really supporting him as much, and him being a bad guy and sort of not like laughing at his jokes and kind of booing him a little bit and being, Team Whittaker. What did you see in Israel's sort of reactions when he wasn't sort of the crowd favorite in that room?
Yeah, he was like, personally, I thought he was flustered. He didn't look comfortable. He didn't look comfortable there. He didn't look comfortable. But fortunately, he's a great fighter, so so it doesn't really matter.
Are you I don't know whether it's going to be press conference for 243 in Melbourne or whether they'll do the media day setup, but is a part of you kind of looking forward to a press conference if there's another one, assuming that it's going to be a similar kind of turnout? You got to think if it's in Melbourne, it might be a bit of a redo of this press conference. I bet the megaphone guy's going to come back as well.
Yeah, it is what it is. Like, I would never say I'm excited for a press conference because it's still a pain in the ass to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, like it's, mate, I know I'm the crowd favorite if we fight in Australia. Like I know this. So and I'm coming to the fight in Melbourne in October, knowing this, and I'm going to draw on their strength, and I'm going to go in there and give it my absolute everything.
It's going to be so good, so good. We can't wait for that fight. Just quickly on that UFC 241 trip for me and Casper, we were there. We watched that Yoel Romero Paulo Costa fight. I mean, what did you make of Paulo Costa's performance against Yoel Romero? It was a pretty crazy fight.
It was a crazy fight. Paulo Costa went out and did what he always does. He laid heavy pressure on, heavy heat, heavy leather in the first round. And just came out attacking well, relentlessly attacking. Got ahead on the scorecards. He started to fade, I believe, in like late second, early entire third, but he had won enough rounds by that stage to get the victory.
Before the fight even took place during media day, he said to us that he's looking forward to flying down in Melbourne, obviously in October, being around you guys for fight week, and I guess getting a bit of attention. He even said that he believes he could beat both you and Israel on the same night. Obviously, a lot of confidence from his end. What did you think of those comments, if you heard them?
I didn't hear him. I have now. Maybe he can. We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing it's going to be is he's hoping I think the UFC is going to put him front row for your fight, and I'm imagining during fight week he's going to try and steal some of your attention, Rob. But I don't think that's going to be much of an issue for you having him around.
It is what it is.
Hey, I was going to say also with this fight, obviously you're ready for the fight, Israel's ready for the fight, but because it's such a huge card, it's at Marvel Stadium, it's going to be around 60,000 people. What's the situation with the UFC and like there being a backup fighter in case like Israel doesn't make it or something happens into the lead up of the fight? Because I know you've spoken to us previously, like you're not a fan of these backup fighters because it's not really fair to the champion, having a guy step up with a different sort of skill set last minute. But then at the same time, I know like you want to get in there and fight. So it's like a bit of an insurance policy if Israel Adesanya doesn't make it. Which at UFC 230, he almost pulled out of his fight because he had a knee injury. So is there a backup fighter for your fight? Has the UFC announced anything for you? Or what's the situation?
I don't know. I've heard absolutely nothing.
Is it something that you kind of think about in any way? I imagine you're just focused on Israel, but if for whatever reason, you got 60,000 or however many people there and, Israel wasn't to make it to the fight, would you consider sort of taking on somebody else on such short notice?
I mean, I'd like to say no.
Yeah.
Because it's because like I've been preparing for so long for one guy, and it's not like this is just an exhibition fight. This is these are pretty meaningful fights. But we'll have to see. We'll have to cross that bridge when we get there.
Someone else we want to quickly touch on, and by the way, we appreciate the time, Rob, and we'll let you go. We always love having you on the show. But a guy that, is getting to the title shot, Colby Covington was talking to the media. I doubt you would have seen this, but basically he discussed how he has plans in fighting you and becoming a middleweight champion after he wins the welterweight belt. He said basically at the press conference, I'm looking to fight Whittaker. He's a bum. He's got no wrestling, no heart, no cardio. I mean, what do you make of Covington's hopes of moving up and possibly fighting you for the title once he becomes champion?
Let's see what he does. There are a few steps he's got to do first, but anything is possible, mate.
Do you find it flattering that someone from another division, sort of in title contention is already eyeing you? You're not really a guy that too many people call out. I feel like you're kind of, you're the reaper of the division. People fight you when they have to, but there's not too many people calling your name.
Yeah, sure, it's flattering. Covington kind of calls out everybody though.
Yeah, he's sort of a calling out machine. I know that you spoke to us about like one day you might move up and fight John Jones and go to like heavyweight, but we were thinking about this. Do you ever see yourself going back down to welterweight? I know those weight cuts were absolutely brutal. Never. So there would never be a thing where you'd be trying to go down and get that title from him, for example.
Not a hope in hell.
I was looking over one of our old interviews. You were kind enough to let us speak to you after your win against Brett Tavares in Adelaide. And, this is when you just moved into the division, and there was still that kind of like, oh, Robert Whittaker's a little bit of a smaller middleweight. And we asked you, what happens when you fight a guy like Rockhold, who's, 6'3" at the time, doing really well at middleweight. And you said no one would ever just sort of have the strength to do what they would want with you. But if you ever fought a guy that's really, really tall, really long, and an amazing striker, that might be the guy that might give you, quite a challenge. Do you feel like Israel is that guy? It's kind of funny looking back on that interview and then seeing that now you guys are going to fight. He's obviously quite long and has a good striking pedigree.
I don't remember that interview, really, to be honest.
How could you forget that? How could you forget that interview? We waited for hours. Your dad set it up. We went to your hotel room.
No, I remember doing the interview. I just don't remember the content.
Yeah.
It was good content.
To be honest, I've come a long way since that fight.
Mm-hmm.
I've come a long way. I'm much more assured of my skill sets. I'm much more assured of myself as a fighter. On the back of that, I had like another 6 fights or something. So yeah, I've come a long way.
I know that when it comes to your sort of training preparation, it's more about yourself and your own evolution as a fighter as opposed to your opponents. But do you sort of look much at the Kelvin Gastelum fight, where Israel Adesanya obviously got caught quite a few times? Because I know a big takeaway from there was, well, if Kelvin can close the distance, Rob theoretically can as well. And a lot of people feel like you might hit harder than Kelvin. As far as the way the fight will play out at 243. Do you take much from that? Or do you see it being similar?
Definitely. And I look at that and, yeah, that's honestly, that's exactly how I see it. If Kelvin can get in and hit him, I can. And, Kelvin could get in there. I think he was winning the striking exchanges early on, and I'm a better striker than Kelvin. Plus, I don't drop off.
Do you feel like this is going to be kind of like a bit of a war, like Kelvin and Israel had, and like you and Yoel had, or do you feel like? I feel like I've heard you say in some interviews that you feel like this one will be a little bit quicker. This fight, you and Israel.
Yeah, I'm going in there with the goal of making sure it's short. I really am.
Well, I'll tell you what, man, it's going to be an exciting fight. Just quickly, speaking of Kelvin, we saw that he's matched up with Darren Till in UFC New York. What do you make of that matchup? A lot of people are like, Darren Till's moving up to middleweight, and his first fight's going to be Kelvin Gastelum. Like, what? That's a pretty big step up, especially when you move up weight classes. What was your reaction when you saw Darren Till would be joining your division against one of the toughest guys like Kelvin Gastelum?
Yeah, I always thought he would move up eventually. He's a big guy. I guess we're going to have to see how he comes back after his last loss. It was a pretty bad knockout. We'll have to see. He's no longer going to be the biggest guy in the division. So, and Kelvin's good. Kelvin is very, very good.
I know it wasn't that long ago that we were sort of saying, or you threw your hat in there against maybe moving up and fighting John Jones at some point, but it kind of seems like the middleweight division is just full of killers at the moment. You got Paulo Costa, you got the winner of Kelvin and Darren Till, you've got always Yoel Romero, Hermanson. Do you kind of feel like you've got your work cut out for you, probably over the next few fights?
Mate, I've always got my work cut out for me. Like every fight is just super hard, and I have to take every fight. Like as my last. It's always they're always hard. You have to treat it like it's do or die, and that's how I've been treating it. That's how I expect to look at it. I do know that there's a lot of work to be done.
Well, I'll tell you what, a lot of exciting times ahead. But as we wrap up, finally, Rob, we have to ask you, and of course, I feel like this all started in our interview, and now people have been giving me shit about it, so I'm just kind of rolling with it at this point. And I think there might even be some Submission Radio t-shirts with this coming out on them soon. But what's the latest anime that you've been watching?
Anime?
Yeah.
I've been off it the last month or so.
No, don't say it's like because it's Israel likes it. Don't say it's because of that.
No. I've been waiting for the seasons to finish up so I can just binge them all at once.
Any recommendations for anyone out there? Because we know there's a lot of anime fans. I know that the first time you sort of revealed that you're into anime, a lot of people blew a lot of people's minds. Half the comment section were like, "Oh my god, Rob loves anime." Any that you can recommend for people?
Oh, there's tons. There's like Code Geass. It's always a great one. I know. That's a really good one. Oh, there's too many. There's a huge list.
Bucky was one that you were enjoying last time, right?
Bucky? Oh no. That's not that good. I've since grown since then.
I feel like
we just every time we speak to you, there's something new about you, Robert Whittaker, which is why this speaking tour is a must for everybody out there. www.robertwhitaker.co is where you can get your tickets. The tour kicks off on the 21st of November. Make sure to get your tickets. He goes through Brisbane, Gold Coast, Newcastle, Canberra, Hobart, Melbourne twice. Very lucky. Adelaide, Sydney, Auckland, Christchurch, even Wollongong. So make sure to jump on, get your tickets. There's a lot of... Oh, there's also Perth as well. Of course, it goes through to December 6th. You can also check out Grange TV episode 54 where Rob opens up about his mental health and training. I kind of think it's one of the funnest podcasts, to be honest with you, Rob, and most interesting podcasts that I've heard from a combat athlete for quite some time. You guys have such a chemistry on there. Grange TV is criminally underrated. Everybody needs to go and check it out. And, of course, see the man take on Israel Adesanya in one of the matchups of the year at Marvel Stadium, October 6th. Tickets are selling fast, so get down there and be a part of a potentially record-breaking night in MMA history. Look at this man, Robert Whittaker. Thank you so much for joining us on Submission Radio, man. We love having you, dude.
Always good to be here. Thank you guys for having me again.